So, upon releasing this video, not only have I cleared Gen 4 in Sinnoh, but I've also had my first experience in the Unova region with Gen 5, making it even more crucial to get that video done too, as I'll need to have that sorted before starting Gen 6. To briefly recap, the last Pokemon title that I covered was my first time journeying in the Hoenn region with Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire, and so far, going down this little retrospective, the quality of these games has remained consistent for various reasons. Now, we're technically heading back into Generation 4, but this time in Sinnoh, a region in which I've actually delved into a little bit many years ago with Pokemon Platinum, but just to keep the tradition of tackling the original releases, I decided to look at Pokemon Diamond and Pearl instead. And so far, I gotta say, this has been the smoothest and most enjoyable experience I've had with these older Pokemon games. Except during a massive wall at the end in which Gen 5 also suffered from, but more on that later. So development of these titles began after being announced at a Nintendo press conference in 2004. The initial release date was supposed to come out in 2005 in Japan, but got pushed back to 2006, celebrating the franchise's 10th anniversary, with everyone else getting it in 2007. As I said in my Ruby and Sapphire video, between that and Generation 4 is where I got my first exposure to the franchise, but Gen 4 was where I truly delved into the ins and outs of what these games were and how they worked. So even if I couldn't get far in my own sessions, I still had a lot of fun watching the anime series as well as walkthrough commentaries online. Much like the previous games, the adventure centers around a young Pokemon trainer traveling the mountainous northern region of Sinnoh, catching and battling Pokemon, taking on the gym leaders, as well as thwarting the schemes of the evil organization, Team Galactic. Much like Team Aqua and Magma, going on a bigger scale than previously, wants to recreate the entire Pokemon universe with the usage of the two legendary Pokemon, Dialga and Palkia, both representing time and space respectively. You know, upon writing and reading this out loud, it does showcase a bit of a disappointment with your character since there is only one parent member again, and despite Team Galactic's introduction being relatively solid, by the end, even with the DS's capability of showcasing, it did cut off a bit too soon once again. I guess this is probably explored a bit more in Platinum with the inclusion of Giratina and the Distortion World, features that I feel like I missed out on, but isn't a complete deal breaker, because everything else about this game, for the most part, is absolutely splendid, making Sinnoh probably one of my favourite regions in the series. The step up in both visuals and music are definite because with the inclusion of 3D polygons, the scaling and depths in these cities and routes are absolutely present, with the Canalave City's gym being a good example with the elevators. Lots have mentioned that this game's soundtrack is quite laid back compared to others, and I can definitely hear that in comparison, but I still immensely enjoyed it. And whilst it isn't a necessary feature, at least to me anyway, the bit of detail in which select tracks sound a little bit different at night are pretty nice. Speaking of which, they brought back the day and night system from Gold and Silver, which I'm sure from an immersive experience is pretty cool, both aesthetically and the kind of Pokemon that come out. However, this is probably more of a me thing, but I have a bit of a stigma when it comes to the limitations of Pokemon coming out at a certain time of day, because I'm the type of gamer that likes to experience all a game has in a general basis, so trying to venture in these routes both day and night just feels like a bit of a hassle, which is why I tend to play these games during the daytime, as it feels a lot more in line with the previous games, and also has the most in terms of quantity and variety. Now of course, the biggest change starting with Gen 4 was the separation of physical and special attacks. Back in Gen 3, a move was determined by its type, which led to some limitations on a Pokemon's stats. For example, a Dark-type Pokemon tends to have better physical attack stats, but Dark-type moves were all special based, enabling them to take advantage, but Gen 4 and onward made each move behave in a different way. So now, a Dark-type move can be physical, allowing Dark-type Pokemon to deal better damage and effects. Supposedly, this has more of a scene in the competitive side of it, but even as a casual fan, I can notice the little differences, which really does help out in the long run. As for my team, well, I went with Chimchar as my starter, who evolved into Infernape, continuing my tradition of favouring Pokemon with high attack and speed, and who was very good throughout most of my journey. Excluding Sword and Shield, never would I thought that I would actually keep my starter bird to the very end, but Staraptor proved me wrong because he had very good attack stats and for just having a cool looking design. The same applies to Luxray as my electric type, despite that she just took way too long to learn any electric attacks and was a little bit slow. For my water type, I went for a Floatzel, a popular choice I'm imagining. He too was also very quick, but quite fragile. But man, after getting that egg and walking around for a bit, it was so good to have a Lucario on my team in the very generation he was introduced in. Whilst his dual combination of his typing was quite dangerous, he made up for it with his moveset, especially with his signature, Orosphere. Last entry was a bit late and some would see it as suicide, but I ended up having a Bomber Snow. Sure, he had so many weaknesses and his stats were mostly above average, but the fact that one of his abilities that made it automatically hail was a lifesaver, especially during the Elite Four, which, believe it or not, I was able to take out Champion Cynthia's Garchomp in one Blizzard attack. Unfortunately, this leads into my biggest drawback throughout my adventure, the sudden difficulty spike with the Elite Four plus Champion, because for once I didn't have much trouble with the gym leaders, the exception being Byron, which took a couple of tries. However, as soon as I got to the Pokemon League, it seemed like everyone's Pokemon got a sudden boost in levels and stats, because despite making careful preparations, my team was constantly getting wrecked, forcing me to grind in Victory Road for hours just so I could stand a chance. I know this is a very common nature in many RPGs, but I can't stand it, making it the only time in which I was feeling miserable when playing this game. Though despite that major drawback, I still cannot deny the level of impact and love that the Sinnoh region gave to a lot of people. Because like I said earlier, Pokémon Diamond and Pearl is probably one of the best experiences that I've had in this series, reminding me back years ago when that generation grabbed my attention and turned me into the passionate fan I am today. So with a fascinating region to explore, a step up in presentation, and for the most part a more consistent structure and difficulty, I'm gonna give Pokémon Diamond and Pearl for the Nintendo DS an 8 out of 10. With that said, I'm feeling a bit on and off with the upcoming releases of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, initially believing that it was just too soon to have another main release, upon remembering that these games usually do come out every 3 years or so. Plus, we already had Legends Arceus earlier this year, which probably explains my slight burnout. But hopefully that won't stop my enthusiasm to play Pokemon X and Y later in autumn, because that generation just means so much to me. As long as I get my Gen 5 video done before that. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. If you're interested, click here to check out some of my other videos, and to stay updated, click here to subscribe to my channel. Until next time, I'm Callum Jones, wishing you all to take care, and I'll see you all later.